The book of Nahum is a short but intense book, prophetic book that focuses on God's judgment against Nineveh, the capital of Assyria. Every one of us remember Nineveh is reached by Jonah, the first, probably the first in the minor prophet, of course, though we do not see major or minor, we only differentiate based on the content, but they are all messengers of God basically. While it's a sobering message of destruction of Nineveh, this book Nahum also highlights God's justice and his power and care for his people. Let's break it down chapter by chapter with some application points. The background is Nahum is a sequel of sorts to the story of Jonah. About a century earlier, Jonah preached to Nineveh and the city repented. But over time, Nineveh returned to its brutal ways. Assyria was known for its violence, arrogance, and oppression, particularly against Judah and Israel. Now, Nahum's prophecy comes as a message of hope for God's people. Their oppressor will face judgment. First chapter, Nahum begins by describing God's character. He is slow to anger but great in power, and he won't leave the guilty unpunished. The imagery here is dramatic. God's wrath shakes the earth, dries up the oceans, and melts mountains. Yet, for those who trust in Him, He is a refuge. What a contrast! We see the ones who bring the good news, the evangelists in their context, also in this first chapter. So, God is both just and merciful. Are we trusting Him as our refuge, especially in difficult times? Nahum reminds us that God sees injustice and will act in His perfect timing. Now, the second chapter, in the second chapter, Nahum paints a vivid picture of Nineveh's destruction. He describes the city under attack, its walls breached, and treasures plundered, and its people basically fleeing. The once mighty city is powerless to stop God's judgment. In fact, that is the powerful, most powerful city or country, that Assyria during those times. Now, whatever it is, here is our application point. No earthly power can stand against God's authority. Are we placing our trust in temporary things like wealth, power, or our status, or in the eternal strength of God? Let Nineveh's downfall be a warning against misplaced confidence. Now we see Nineveh's shame and desolation. Nahum continues with a scathing description of Nineveh's sins, violence, deceit, and exploitation of poor and needy. He compares the city to a harlot who has led nations astray with her treachery. God promises to expose Nineveh's shame and make it an object of scorn. The chapter ends with a lament-like tone. Nineveh's wound is fatal, and no one will mourn its downfall. So God will always confront evil, no matter how powerful it seems. Are we living in a way that honors Him, or are we allowing pride and sin to lead us astray? This chapter calls us to examine our hearts and ensure we are on the side of justice and humility. So, the key themes and contemporary relevance: God's justice. Nahum reminds us that God is not indifferent to evil. He sees injustice, whether it's personal or systematic, and He will act upon it. In today's world, this gives hope to the oppressed and challenges us to live righteously. in front of God. And we get to see God's power. The dramatic imagery of Nahum underscores God's unmatched power. It's a reminder that no matter how chaotic or oppressive the world seems, God is ultimately in control, omnipotent God. So that we shouldn't forget. God is sovereign. And now we see third theme as God is refuge. So here, amid judgment, Nahum offers comfort to those who trust in God. Are we seeking Him as our safe place in times of trouble, or are we trying to handle life on our own? Most of the times, we mess up things, especially when we deal with depression or some loss. We turn to some addictions or some kind of thoughtless actions which further take us away from the Lord. It's a great warning for us. We should not trust in any other thing, but we should immediately turn to God where we find our strength and our refuge. So, the final thoughts, the book of Nahum may seem harsh at first glance, but it's a vital reminder of God's justice and His care for His people. It assures us that evil will not go unpunished and that God's timing is always perfect. Nahum challenges us to trust God. Even when we face oppression or injustice, we can turn to God for the hope. And it also wants us to avoid the pride and arrogance that led to Nineveh's downfall. Let's live with humility, seeking God as our refuge and aligning our lives with His justice and mercy. Remember, He is truly slow to anger. God bless you.